Rosicrucian Art of Absent Healing by Harvey Spencer Lewis. Important preliminary instruction. Before any member of the Rosicrucian order attempts to employ the system outlined in this book, every word must be read carefully, with concentrated attention. Every paragraph is important, for nothing has been put into this book that is unnecessary. The more advanced monographs of our study contain a complete healing system intended for members who wish to delve deeper into the unique Rosicrucian laws of contact healing. This direct contact healing system is different from any other that has been presented by any Eastern or Western schools of metaphysics, except the Rosicrucians, being especially valuable for physicians, nurses, or therapists who have some practical healing experience, although it is very useful to every student in maintaining perfect health in their family. In some of the more advanced lessons, various methods are presented, as well as several suggestions made for the employment of the Rosicrucian healing processes in the application of distance treatment, rather than contact treatment. There are so many of our members who wish to cooperate with us in applying distance treatments, and who also wish to help their relatives and friends who are suffering from some ailment, that this special book has been compiled outlining a very complete system of distance treatment, based on the principles contained in the various degrees of our study. This book does not replace the suggestions and instructions regarding distance healing given in the more advanced study, but it enables members of the initial degrees to apply some of these principles before reaching the more advanced degrees. Therefore, it is necessary that these instructions be followed very carefully, and that each step of the process of applying a treatment be followed exactly as it is outlined here. The repeated reading of these principles and familiarization with every detail will bring reward in terms of successful treatments. The nature of distance treatments. Treatments of this nature are those applied to a distant person, whether that distance is a few meters or many kilometers. Distance treatments may be applied to a person who is in an adjacent room, a nearby building, a distant city, or in any place or circumstance. Contact treatment, already mentioned, is a treatment that must necessarily be applied under certain fixed conditions. However, a distance treatment can be performed at any time and in almost any circumstance. Some well-defined rules need to be followed. If they are ignored, a lower percentage of success will be obtained. The first step. The first thing to keep in mind when applying distance treatments is that greater success will be obtained if the patient desires treatment of this nature and has requested it. It is not necessary for the patient to know exactly what kind of metaphysical treatment you are going to apply, nor is it necessary to mention the fact that you are a Rosicrucian or that you will apply Rosicrucian treatments, if it does not please you to do so. However, the patient must be aware that you are going to apply a metaphysical or cosmic treatment, and they must know that a treatment based on scientific, as well as cosmic, laws will be applied, and not just some type of treatment, based exclusively on prayers. But, whether the patient knows something about the type of treatment they are going to receive or not, they must be desirous of having some form of cosmic treatment applied to them, in addition to any other treatment they may receive from physicians, therapists, nurses, or other persons. In other words, there will be less success if you attempt to perform treatments on people who do not know that you will be doing something for them, or that you will appeal to the cosmic on their behalf. Your first step should be to ensure that the person desiring your help wishes to receive some assistance in addition to any type of treatment they may be receiving. If you can speak to them on the phone, visit them, write to them, or if a family member can do so and obtains the certainty that the patient will be pleased to be assisted through your type of treatment, then you will have taken the first step, which is very important. The second step. If it is possible to arrange times for your treatments when the patient can be in a state of relaxation to receive them, you will have a valuable additional factor of assistance. Your distance treatment can be done at night, when the patient is asleep and, therefore, in a state of relaxation. Naturally, these treatments can be performed without the patient arranging any specific time. However, some additional treatments are frequently necessary during the day, and if these can be done when the patient is sitting or lying down in a state of relaxation for 10 minutes, they will be more effective. If you can arrange, in most cases, for the patient to remain lying down or sitting in a relaxed or quiet state for 10 minutes, let us say, beginning at 10 in the morning and again at 3 in the afternoon, or at whatever time is convenient for the operator and the patient, you will have in this an additional aid. If you are unable to contact the patient or communicate with them in any way in order to arrange the daytime treatments, you will then have to choose a period in the morning and another in the afternoon for your treatments, as you believe the patient needs them, or when it is most convenient for the one applying them. You must remember that, even if the patient is more or less active, moving about or thinking of other things, cosmic contact may be established to almost the same degree as would be achieved if they were sitting or lying down, in a relaxed position and mental attitude. The third step: be sure to advise the patient, as well as their relatives and friends, if you can explain something to them about your work, that they must not dismiss the physician, nurse, or other type of assistant who may be helping the patient to recover. The Rosicrucian system does not interfere with anything that is being done by the patient through any system of therapeutics, whether it be medical, physical, mental, or spiritual. You must be aware that you are not taking the place of the physician the patient may have, nor of any system they may be employing, but rather amplifying what is being done without interfering in any way. You must make it clear to everyone that what you are doing regarding the application of distance treatments is related to your studies and your work as a student of the divine principles of life, and that you are not presenting yourself as a professional therapist, unless you are credentialed as a physician, nurse, or therapist of some system, that you are not making a business out of your treatment, nor are you charging fees, attempting to harm, or discrediting the reputation of any other healing system or of any school of therapeutics, or indeed of any physician or therapist. Emergency treatments. If you see people injured in an accident or are informed that several people are injured due to an accident, and you wish to help them, you may employ the system of withdrawing to some place where you can be alone and unobserved, immediately applying a distance treatment to the people who need it without consulting them or without consulting anyone else, finding then, in most cases, that your work will have been of great value. However, outside of these emergency cases, it is always best to ask the patient, especially in the case of a friend or relative, whether or not they desire your treatments. This is governed by a cosmic law, and it is stated that none of the great healers of the past, not even Jesus, applied any treatment without being asked to do so. When a person asks for a treatment or expresses the desire to be helped by some individual, they automatically place themselves in psychic and spiritual attunement with that individual, and this is very helpful. The nature of the treatments. The system presented here is not based on faith healing or on faith on the part of the patient. Although it is true that it is helpful for the patient to cooperate with the operator by relaxing and remaining quiet at certain times when the latter is applying the treatment, it is not necessary for them to do anything else other than to put themselves in a receptive state. It is not necessary to increase the patient's faith by telling them what you are going to do or how you are going to accomplish it, nor do you need to tell them anything about the success you have achieved in other cases or about what they can expect. You will find, through your experience in treating people who cooperate, as well as people who do not know you are treating them, that the latter have the same sensations and the same singular perception of your treatments as those who are aware that you are treating them. Naturally, if a person does not know they are being treated, they will not be able to use faith to help you. Therefore, you must eliminate from your mind any idea that faith on the part of the patient is necessary. However, the operator themselves must have faith in the system, in addition to having faith in the cosmic, to do what is right and essential. You must not have faith in your ability as an individual, for it is not you who is performing the healing. God affects all healing that is performed at any time, by any system, whether one employs medicine, electricity, surgery, prayers, massages, or anything else. You are merely an instrument between the earthly cosmic forces and the patient, after having offered yourself to God and to the cosmic to become this instrument or channel. In truth, the practitioner is no more the true healing agent than the delicate scalpel in the hands of the surgeon. The latter's knowledge guides the scalpel so that it performs a certain work, and the same wisdom that directs their hand will also direct the natural processes of healing after the surgical operation is finished. But, exactly as the surgeon learns by experience to have faith in the knowledge they have acquired and to have faith in the processes of nature to bring about certain results, you too must have absolute faith in the system you yourself are employing, and you must never give a treatment with the idea of merely seeing if the system will work, or with a vague hope that it works. If you are not sure that what you are going to do for a patient will help them, do not apply the treatment. The diagnosis, although you are not actually performing the healing, but rather acting as a channel for the healing forces, it is necessary to inform yourself of the nature of the patient's illness. However, do not try to give your opinion to others, because diagnosis is part of a physician's duties. Naturally, you should ask what the patient is suffering from or what the doctors or other people say so that you know whether you will be treating a broken bone, a toothache, a head injury, a prolonged illness, or whatever it may be. However, it is not necessary for you to go into the detail of asking the patient's temperature, nor do you need to know what their pulse is and exactly what symptoms the patient complains of in different parts of the body, or other things of that sort. For the same reason, when applying treatments you must not try to determine the manner in which the healing should be accomplished. This is the most serious mistake that any healer employing cosmic methods can make. It is equivalent to trying to put yourself in the place of the cosmic and telling it exactly what to do for the patient. This is where almost every other system of healing fails, including medicine and surgery. It is impossible for the patient, let alone another person, to know exactly what is wrong inside them, as well as what should be done first, second, third, fourth, etc. in the healing process. If you hand the entire process over to the cosmic, you will find that the healing will take place better and faster than if you try to visualize what must be done. The first step. However, it is important to ask some patients who have been struck by a sudden illness what they did in the preceding days that violated any of the natural laws. If the illness is due to a wrong diet, an incorrect way of living or thinking, or reckless acts of any kind, the patient must be made to understand that if they continue to violate these laws of nature, the illness will likely persist despite any treatments applied to them. It is important to tell patients who are suffering from an illness that has lasted for days and weeks, or that seems to be affecting their entire physical system, to bear in mind the fact that hatred, jealousy, hostility, or any kind of destructive thought that persists in their mind regarding any living being will prevent them from recovering. This will likely be the cause of the illness. In other words, the patient must be made to understand that for the treatments to be effective, their mind must be free of all destructive mental attitudes, and they must additionally discontinue any acts that are contrary to natural laws. Overwork, inadequate clothing for cold weather, exposure to the elements, working in poor light, lack of exercise, overeating or malnutrition, incorrect combinations of food and drink, and many other things constitute violations of natural laws that need to be discontinued. These are the only recommendations you should make to the patient. Warning: never prescribe any medicines, ointments, tonics, teas, pills, lozenges, diets, special foods, or anything of the sort, for, in accordance with the laws of various countries, these recommendations can be interpreted as prescriptions, and thus you would be violating medical laws and placing yourself in serious trouble. To people who desire information on diets, you may say that there are many books that can be obtained in libraries, or by writing to nutritionists or physicians who prescribe diets and proper food combinations. Never make any recommendations in writing, for if you do, this could be interpreted as a prescription, diagnosis, or formula for treatment. A glass of ordinary cold water, not some special type of bottled water, is the only thing you can safely recommend to a patient without breaking any law. But never give this glass of water yourself to any patient who is bedridden or anywhere else. Instead, let a family member do it. The second step. First of all, it is presumed that the operator is in good health at the moment they are applying the treatment. If they are suffering from a headache, fatigue, or any form of mental or physical indisposition, they should not give treatments. They must begin every treatment with a prayerful, spiritual, and humble attitude. They should feel grateful for the opportunity to apply a treatment, remembering that just as they serve the cosmic in its work, the cosmic will be willing and attentive to serve them. They must never be proud of what they are doing, nor of its results. They must not accept a personal, individual reward for their services, nor allow themselves to be praised as a person endowed with special powers. Having arranged a special period for your distant treatment or chosen a period that is convenient for you and not known to the patient, the next step consists of sitting where you are quiet and alone, if possible, although these treatments can be performed while traveling in a relaxed state. What is important for you to do is to detach yourself from your environment and, through mental concentration, try to think only of two factors: the patient who needs help and the cosmic powers around you, which will employ your mind as a channel for the treatment. This is neither the place nor the time for us to try to explain to you why the cosmic employs your mind as a channel, since all of this is covered in the monographs. It is not necessary that you try to visualize the patient with such clarity that you can see them, feel their suffering, or anything of that sort. Nor is it necessary to visualize in detail the nature of the condition the patient is in, nor to try to visualize the nature of the treatment that the cosmic must apply. You may even not know the patient's name, and only know that it is a woman or a man living in a certain part of the city, who is suffering from some general condition that has been briefly explained to you, and whom you wish to reach. The cosmic will take charge of establishing the correct connection. It is enough to think of the person who is to then receive the treatment through you. Having established your mental attitude with these two thoughts in mind, you should take a very deep breath and hold it for as long as possible for you. Then you should exhale slowly through the nose with the mouth closed. While doing so, you must hold the thought that you are coming into mental and psychic contact with the patient. Then you should make a brief prayer to the cosmic silently, mentally. The prayer can be more or less like this: humbly, I beseech God and the cosmic powers to direct through me, to the patient, the healing forces of the universe, so that there may be an awakening of the constructive and creative powers latent within them, so that the pain ceases and normal conditions are restored, thereby resulting in perfect health. You may make the prayer longer, if you wish, just as you may repeat pious thoughts as many times as you want. However, you should not try to tell the cosmic what to do in any specific type of treatment. Direct your prayer to God, and not to any individual master. Offer yourself as a channel of connection and harmonization. Continue mentally repeating the thoughts and prayers during the 5 or 10 minutes in which you are performing the treatment. 5 minutes will be sufficient in common cases of any sickly condition. But in emergency cases, where accidents have occurred and someone is losing blood rapidly due to injuries or is suffering intense pain, the treatment may be done for 10 minutes duration. In these extreme cases, a second treatment must be done within an hour, and further ones must be applied during the first 24 hours. In all ordinary cases of illness, one treatment in the morning, one in the afternoon, and another at night, when the patient is asleep, will be sufficient for every 24 hours. The third step. As soon as you have concluded the 5 or 10-minute period of concentration, you should say a brief prayer of gratitude to God and the cosmic for this opportunity to help, and then rise from your position of concentration and attend to your duties, in an attitude of complete confidence that the cosmic is acting and continuing the constructive work of healing in your patient's body. There must be no doubt in your mind regarding having reached the patient. Your mental attitude at this point is very important, and it must be one of humility as well as extreme confidence. It is not necessary for you to think of the patient in the interval between treatments. Keep in mind the schedule you have established for them, and adhere to it strictly. Night treatments. One of the most successful periods for night treatments is between 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning, in the location where the patient is. If the patient is very far from the operator, then this hour may be very different from that of the place where the latter is located. The important period is between 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning, in the time zone in which the patient is located. This is the hour when people who are ill find themselves in the most intimate cosmic and psychic contact, as well as in a very special receptive psychic condition. It is the hour when many special workers of a morgue perform hundreds of treatments. Whether the patient is deeply asleep or merely drowsy, quiet and relaxed, this psychic hour of the early morning is very effective. After a few days of treatment, arrangements should be made for someone to report on the patient's condition. In all ordinary cases, there should be daily improvement, but in cases where the patient's physical condition has persisted for years or many months, a longer period of treatment will be necessary. In some cases, several weeks of daily treatment may be required to bring about the desired results. Important points. Remember that any system of healing that claims to be able to cure any disease in any and every case is misrepresenting the facts. Transition is inevitable in every person's life, constituting something that will certainly occur to every human being. In the life of every living being, there is a moment when transition must necessarily occur, and that moment may take place in the first year of life, in the 100th, or in any year within that interval. Regardless of how healthy the person has been, when the cosmic decrees that transition must occur, something happens and the patient falls ill, suffers an accident, or their health suddenly collapses. If the cosmic decrees that transition must occur, then no system of treatment can prevent it, and any claim on the part of any doctor or therapist of any school of healing that perfect health can always be maintained and that the collapse of the physical system is unnecessary is a misrepresentation of the facts and leads to very painful disappointments. Therefore, you will eventually treat a case in which nothing that you yourself or anyone else can do will prevent the cosmic law from being fulfilled, and transition will occur in due time. Sometimes certain illnesses are the direct result of deliberately incorrect actions on the part of the patient, such as excessive drinking, drinking poisonous liquids, overeating, committing a crime, or a violent outburst of anger. These diseases are frequently decreed by the cosmic, not as a form of punishment, but rather to teach a lesson, so that, in these cases, the cosmic may be slightly slower in restoring normal health than in other cases. And if you discover that a patient remains ill despite the treatments you have prayed to the cosmic to apply, You must not make any attempt to judge. Let no one ever hear you say that the patient's illness is a cosmic punishment, a cosmic law, or a karmic manifestation, for you will then be trying to set yourself up as a judge and decree a sentence. Simply state that you have done the utmost within your reach and that you are confident that the cosmic will do what is best for the sick person, so that they must have patience and entertain no doubts, but await the final results. When treating people who have very severe colds, one should bear in mind that the treatment applied between 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning will, as a general rule, cause them to perspire freely before 6 in the morning. Therefore, you should advise them to keep well wrapped up in bed, rather than throwing off the covers or attempting to get up upon feeling too warm or sweaty. These patients should remain in bed during the following morning, until noon, so that the effects of the perspiration gradually subside. Generally, a single such treatment will be sufficient to cure a cold. It will be interesting to observe the manner in which the patient perspires and how the fever and congestion are reduced. In these cases, if not in almost all, it will be useful to tell the patient that they should drink a glass of ordinary cold water immediately before going to bed. This will be of use for the treatment that is to be performed between 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning. Never attempt any contact treatments in which you have to touch the patient's body. These contact treatments are explained in the Rosicrucian monographs, but they should be used only as explained therein. When applying distant treatments, follow exactly the procedure given here and never attempt other types of procedures or aids. You should not worry that, by applying these treatments, you will contract any of the patient's conditions. Although it is true that, in some cases, your feeling of sympathy for the patient's suffering may cause you to feel something of that suffering, this sensation of yours will disappear as soon as you have finished the treatment and will not be due to any psychic transfer of the patient's condition. Patients who are about to be operated on by the hands of some competent surgeon, in a hospital or anywhere else, may also be helped provided that, at the exact moment of the operation, you send them a distant treatment to strengthen them and awaken the constructive and healing forces of their body, in order to keep them active during the operation as well as immediately after it. If the patient is unconscious at the time of the operation due to an anesthetic, they may even feel your presence during the treatment. And if they are not unconscious, they will know that you have been helping them and the pain will be less intense. Children are very sensitive to distant treatment, as are older adults. Many others will not realize that a treatment has been given to them, but will later notice the effects. A morgue expects its members to employ this system, as well as any other resources taught in our lessons, to help people to the highest possible degree concerning the personal problems of life, and thus help us to carry out the great Rosicrucian work. It is our desire to see our members become instruments in the service of humanity, so that each member may be a powerful force for good within the bosom of human brotherhood. Be sure to review some of the early lessons of the neophyte degrees, where recommendations are made regarding the causes of indisposition and disease, so that you are familiar with certain fundamental laws. Reports of extraordinary cases in which the Rosicrucian system has been useful will always be welcome. Observations. Never criticize any system of healing or surgery. A Rosicrucian recognizes virtues in all known systems, as well as the great good that has been accomplished for humanity through these systems. Never discuss with the patient the good or bad effect of any previous types of treatment that have been given to them by anyone. Neither you nor the patient is properly qualified to understand the good that may actually have been achieved by any other prior treatments. Never encourage the discontinuation of any type of treatment the patient may be using, as other systems, methods, or treatments may be achieving some benefit of which you know nothing and the patient knows little. You are not expected to supplant any other system or any other physician, but rather to enhance the benefit that is being provided and to render additional aid. Never prescribe anything in the form of medications, remedies, or adjuncts, specifically mentioning the names of any items to be ingested or applied externally. This is not your field, your privilege, or your right. Employ entirely the Rosicrucian methods and leave everything else to be recommended or employed by licensed physicians. Do not accept any payment for your work unless you are a licensed, registered, and recognized physician and are charging for your professional services. Make sure that you are well, in good health, and that you are pure, discreet, polite, tolerant, and grateful for the opportunity to serve. Keep careful notes of all your work in a diary or some book that you can consult at any time in the future so that you know exactly what treatments you applied to each patient and to all patients, as well as when, where, why, and what results were obtained. Cooperate in all Rosicrucian service activities in your affiliated body and also with the welfare work in your community. Concentration. It is a fairly generally admitted fact among thinking men and women of the Western world that the most serious obstacle they face in their daily lives is the inability to concentrate their attention and focus their inner consciousness easily and at will. The art of concentration is a simple matter for the peoples of the East. It is also a simple process and a highly prized quality in the life of all tribes of primitive peoples, and it was even a highly cultivated quality in the life of the American Indians, who probably brought this art with them in their wanderings to the American continent many centuries ago. For the businessman, the inability to concentrate properly constitutes, in fact, a very serious matter. In many respects, the ability to concentrate is very similar to that of relaxing completely, so that the two processes are interrelated. Both constitute absolute necessities for anyone who is trying to be successful in life through the employment of all mental faculties and the application of all knowledge. Success in life depends on concentration. Thousands of successful businessmen have frankly admitted, in articles, interviews, personal conversations, and in other ways, that their difficulty in concentrating properly was one of the greatest problems they had to learn to overcome, and that the effort they expended frequently caused them a greater waste of time and energy than any other inhibitory factor. Concentration is necessary for every activity. Thousands of businessmen who have not been successful in life have stated clearly that the main cause of their failure is their inability to concentrate. There is hardly an hour of the day in the lives of busy men and women in which the process of mental concentration is not somehow necessary. Concentration is not only necessary when attempting to memorize certain facts, or to recall facts retrieved from memory, but concentration is also necessary when analyzing, examining, or classifying facts, or efficiently examining any proposition or matter that arises in the course of business. At any moment in our lives, the need to answer some question immediately requires the ability to concentrate for a few seconds and, in this way, focus the entire thinking being on the question in order to arrive at an adequate answer. Whenever someone is called upon to decide on a debated point or to reach a decision regarding a pending matter, unless the mind is capable of concentrating its attention and perception on the subject, it cannot be given fair and adequate consideration. In order for the individual to situate and associate themselves with their environment, plan their activities, and outline their daily work or the course of their actions, they must be able to concentrate the mind and consciousness easily and properly, as soon as this becomes necessary. Physical incapacity. In truth, the capacity for concentration applies to and affects so many of our mental and physical activities, hour by hour, day by day, that it constitutes a factor of direction and control, responsible not only for efficiency and success, but also for happiness, contentment, and the real enjoyment of everything that occurs in our waking hours. If our eyes became incapable of focusing our vision, such that we became unable to direct it to a given point and keep it fixed on that point for a moment, we would soon understand how valuable the capacity to concentrate our vision is. When this inability to properly focus the eyes on a given point is due to physiological conditions of the visual organ, we resort to the use of glasses, or special lenses that will force the eyes into proper focus and make us capable of fixing our visual attention on any chosen point or place. Wavering attention causes mental disturbances. If our eyes were to waver and oscillate in their attention, varying in their concentration as much as our consciousness and our mind oscillate and waver in our attempts to concentrate on a certain thought or idea, we would find ourselves incapable of enjoying most of life's blessings, just as we would be incapable of reading, studying, or even efficiently tending to our daily activities. When the inability to concentrate properly reaches a high degree of wavering and oscillation, it comes to seriously affect the mental consciousness, leading to mental disturbances and even to physical disorders of various kinds. Normal people can develop perfect concentration. There are types of mentally ill individuals who are incapable of concentrating their attention or fixing their mind on a single idea, just as there are certain types of mentally ill people who are incapable of fixing their eyes firmly on one point. Wavering, rapidly moving, unsteady eyes indicate two types of people: those who are mentally ill and incapable, or those who have been occupied for a long time in positions or in various professions or activities that require the constant changing of the point of vision. There is perhaps a third class which can be appropriately included in the first, that of people whose eyes are constantly shifting and moving out of fear that their crimes will be perceived in them. That is, those who suffer from the consciousness that they are guilty of crimes and feel afraid to look people directly in the eye, being obliged to constantly watch and look out for the inevitable recognition by representatives of the law. We exclude from the classification highly capable individuals, those whose sight is constantly changing and who are incapable of concentrated vision. But we must also place among the failures in life, among the incapable or unfortunate, those who entirely lack the capacity to concentrate their attention or fix their consciousness on a given subject. And just as the eyes can be aided with proper glasses so that they become capable of focusing the attention of sight, so too can the consciousness of the human mind be aided in its capacity to concentrate and focus its attention through certain processes and exercises of a psychological nature. First principle: the brain controls voluntary actions. It must be understood, above all, that human consciousness constitutes a very complex mechanism and type of psychological function. The human brain is the great control panel of the human body's functioning, especially of those functions that are entirely voluntary. There are many involuntary functions inside the body that are not controlled by the brain of man in the exercise of his will. Generally classified in this category are the functions of the heartbeat, the rhythmic action of other organs, the reaction throughout the body by means of certain nerve impulses, as well as the more mysterious activities of the lungs, stomach, intestines, kidneys, and gallbladder, for example, in their work of maintaining normal activity. Fortunately for man, these important functions were not handed over to his arbitrary or voluntary control. Considering the way in which man neglects the functions over which he has control, it is truly a blessing for him that his brain and his will do not have absolute control over all the parts, functions, and activities that constitute the human body in its living state. Consciousness is inherent in every cell of the body. Man's consciousness is not situated exclusively in the brain. It constitutes a part of every living cell in his body. In truth, man's consciousness is the sum of the millions of types and degrees of consciousness that exist in all these cells. It is an accumulated consciousness, for although it may function and manifest itself by registering in the brain as a unit, it functions separately and independently in the various parts of the body. Nevertheless, man's perception of his consciousness requires focusing, which must necessarily occur in the brain, as the objective center for the manifestation of consciousness in all parts of the body. The focusing of consciousness occurs in the brain. We may liken the human body, with all its nerve centers and the localized centers of consciousness of the cells and organs, to the thousands of telephones in a community, equipped with a central station to which they all respond. On the other hand, we may liken these scattered points of consciousness in the human body to a large number of photocells or electronic eyes, which are receiving light impressions that need to be transmitted to a central point where they are focused in the form of perception. This perception must imprint itself on the mind of man as a single impression and not as a multiplicity of impressions. Therefore, we see that it is impossible for the brain and the consciousness of man to perceive more than one thought or one impression at the same time. It is a reality that man cannot think, attending. We perceive only one thing at a time. We may see a man walking down the street, reading a book and understanding what he is reading. If we observe him, we will find that, although he does not take his eyes off the book, he will seem to direct his feet correctly, stopping when the people in front of him do the same or walking around them. Upon reaching an intersection, he may hear the traffic signal and stop along with the others, waiting until he hears the signal again. It may then appear that the man was able to read and be conscious of his reading, while at the same time being conscious of his walking. The truth regarding this is that, in this process, the man divides his attention between reading and walking. He cannot think about both things at the same time. He cannot fix his eyes on the words of the book, transform those symbols into thoughts, be conscious of those thoughts, and, at the same time, think about his walking and the traffic signals. What actually occurs is a rapid alternation of consciousness or attention, so that, after a few words, there is a fraction of a second in which his attention is directed to his walking, followed by a return of it to the reading. This alternation of attention is so rapid that it seems difficult for a man to realize that he interrupts his reading to momentarily concentrate or reflect on his walking. Second principle: eliminating unrelated thoughts from the mind. Therefore, we see that, in order to properly appreciate our perception of things, we must focus our attention and consciousness on one thing at a time. This requires concentration in its simple form. However, more difficult than this is eliminating from our mind not only the things that bear no relation to the thought upon which we wish to concentrate, but eliminating from the mind the images, ideas, and impressions that spring from our memory and interfere with the effort to keep consciousness focused solely on one point or one subject. Most people who lack the ability to concentrate frankly admit that their greatest difficulty lies in preventing the occurrence, in their consciousness, of the thousands of thoughts and ideas that rush into it as soon as the mind begins to think and analyze. Here, indeed, is a very serious interference in the individual process of thinking, analyzing, and reasoning logically. It is also one of the greatest obstacles to success in memorization. People who are most seriously affected by the inability to concentrate admit that, the moment they try to concentrate their attention and fix their consciousness on some thought or idea, attempting to recall certain facts from memory, the entire body becomes slightly relaxed, while the brain immediately becomes excited. To these people, it seems that the slightest degree of relaxation of the body, the lightest pause in physical activity, causes the brain to begin functioning more actively than at any other time. These people suffer from insomnia because, when they prepare to sleep and relax the physical body, the brain immediately becomes excited. Even when they are riding in an automobile, strolling calmly, or attempting to give rest to the body at the theater or during a meal, the drop in physical activity seems to be immediately accompanied by an excess of mental activity. Third principle. Thought requires nerve energy. It is a reality that the act of thinking and any other forms of mental activity, as well as the concentration of consciousness, require the use of nerve energy. Physical, muscular activity of any kind also requires nerve energy. People can become tired, exhausted, and have their nerve energy depleted because of purely mental activities just as easily as they can from purely physical activities. Brain exhaustion is as real as muscular fatigue. However, the moment the body's physical activities are attenuated, a greater amount of energy is released in the physical body to be employed by the brain, and the latter utilizes this extra amount of nerve energy by becoming excited. On the other hand, this mental activity interferes with certain physical activities taking place within the body. The hours before meals are the best. After a person has eaten a very heavy meal, a large amount of nerve energy is required for its proper digestion, so that there is not enough nerve energy left over for the brain to employ in any considerable intensity of thought, analysis, and reasoning. For this reason, students or people who are obliged to think and analyze greatly and deeply find it impossible to use their brain and mind efficiently immediately following a heavy meal. Thus it is that memorization can be analyzed more easily before eating than after doing so, and at rest rather than when exercising. Many of the best students in the world, many of the people who are attending colleges and universities and who need to prepare for their exams or special studies, have found that the first hours after sunrise and before the first meal are the best for reading and memorization. This is because the body, being rested, is not intensely employing nerve energy. Furthermore, the stomach being empty and no other very active function taking place, the brain can utilize a large amount of nerve energy to understand what the eyes read and register it in memory. Fourth principle. Complete relaxation is of great help. From all the facts presented thus far, we apprehend that the best method for concentrating is to sit in a relaxed and quiet position. This enables the brain to think more easily and efficiently. It is observed that it is customary, even among those who have never thought carefully about the subject, for a person to sit down when trying to think or reason, even going so far as to rest their head in their hands, close their eyes, and become as physically relaxed as possible, so that the mind and brain have every opportunity to function. In every photograph and painting of a thinking person, it is observed that they are in a relaxed position, usually indicated by closed eyes, or the head resting on the hand, in total peace and tranquility. This reminds us of the wonderful sculptural work known as The Thinker, except for the fact that the man's position does not seem to be as rested, nor does the body seem to be quite as at ease, as should be the case with someone who is thinking deeply. However, there are those who claim that, even in the most comfortable relaxed position, with eyes closed and employing all voluntary means to focus attention on concentration, the mind becomes filled with undesirable thoughts, impressions, and ideas. Pending worries, anticipated anxieties, expected joys, pending activities that must be attended to very shortly, forgotten things that should have been done a little earlier, and many other matters, rush into consciousness and pass through the mind like an endless stream of images. It is impossible to concentrate consciousness on any given subject when these impressions pass through the mind or accumulate and fill consciousness, such that nothing else can make itself felt exclusively. What then should be done, or what can be done, to improve this situation and make perfect concentration possible? Fifth principle. Forming mental images. In the first place, man possesses another great faculty, which is that of forming mental images. This faculty is part of the process of imagining and is what gives man the great power of imagination. This special faculty enables man to form a mental image of anything he has seen or heard of, or even of something he has never seen or heard of, but which he may create out of the nothingness of his consciousness and transform into a reality. It is easy for the reader to prove to himself that he has this faculty to imagine or form images in his mind, in his consciousness, and make them seem real. For example, I will describe an object I have in my hands. I tell you that it is a piece of bronze, with the approximate thickness of very heavy cardboard. It has a circular shape and the approximate size of a saucer, or, let us say, 14 to 15 centimeters in diameter. Now the reader can visualize this flat bronze disc, 14 centimeters in diameter, and as thick as very heavy cardboard, so highly polished that it shines and almost looks like a piece of gold. It bears no engraving whatsoever, nor any design. It is merely a piece of bronze, flat, bright, gleaming, cut into the shape of a disc. Can the reader see it? Pause your reading of this paragraph for a few moments, close your eyes, and visualize that flat bronze disc in the palm of your hand. Now let us turn it over. On the other side, in the center of the polished surface, there is a 5-pointed star in blue enamel. The star measures about 4 centimeters at its greatest distance from point to point. The blue is much like the blue of the sky on a clear, beautiful day. Now close your eyes again and, for a few moments, hold that disc in the palm of your right hand. Observe it and see the blue star upon it. Visualization is related to concentration. If the reader saw the blue star in his hand, then he will now know what we mean by mental images. And if he truly saw that disc and the star, for just a moment, he will have had a perfect example of concentration. On the other hand, if he was unable to see the disc with his eyes closed, and could not visualize it because his mind was trying to imagine the bronze in some shape other than circular, or because his mind was trying to verify whether 14 centimeters were more or less than what they seemed to him, or trying to analyze the shade of blue and the shape of the star, thereby causing the vision of the disc to become indistinct and to constantly fade away, then he will have had an excellent example of the inability to concentrate. Sixth principle: simple experiments. Through this brief analysis and by trying this experiment with the bronze disc, the reader can determine whether or not he is capable of concentrating, whether he knows how to do it. If he was unable to see the disc correctly, he must immediately begin the practice of certain exercises that will develop his ability to concentrate. The first thing to do for this purpose is to choose a small object in his home, or something the reader carries with him, such as a coin, a key, a small purse, an ornamental button, or something simple in design, but which is modern or new, to observe it for a few moments until its appearance is registered, then to close his eyes and try to see it mentally as clearly as possible. Do not try to make a photographic image of the object suddenly reveal itself to your consciousness, for you will find that you need to create the image in your consciousness by recalling what your eyes saw and voluntarily introducing the details, exactly as if you were an artist painting the object. In this case, however, your painting will be done with a mental brush, with mental pigments, and on a mental canvas. At first, the reader may find that he has not remembered all the details of the object he observed, and that he will need to observe it a second time. He may also find that it is difficult to obtain a sufficiently clear mental image. After a little practice, he should become capable of forming an image clear enough to identify it. For example, suppose someone were to ask him 6 months from now to describe the small object he had been observing. Could the reader close his eyes and see it with enough clarity to state whether it was circular, square, or hexagonal? Whether it was bright and gleaming or dull? Whether its color was a dark red or light, a brown or wine-colored, a cherry red or a pink, and whether it was surrounded by an ornament or rim, small stars or circles? The best exercise consists of taking some simple object that has various designs or elements that the reader can examine for a few moments, and then closing his eyes and recalling the details while simultaneously forming the image. This exercise can be practiced while taking a walk, resting in a relaxed manner, or during moments of leisure, so that, after a few weeks of practice, he will consider it a fascinating pastime, almost like a game, discovering at the same time that he is developing three faculties. First, the faculty of observing and retaining things. Second, the ability to form images and visualize. And third, the ability to concentrate. Concentration. By developing these three faculties, he will not only be helping to improve his ability to concentrate, but also developing his ability to memorize and recall what he has memorized. The second part of this work, which deals with memorization, is devoted entirely to the simple presentation of facts and exercises that lead to accuracy of memory. Memorization. Thousands of people claim that they find it difficult to memorize with the same ease as they did in childhood, or to recall what they have memorized. Many people say that they can remember names, but not faces. Others claim that they can remember names and faces, but cannot memorize telephone numbers and addresses. Still others declare that they can memorize historical facts, business appointments, and the common events of the day, but cannot remember certain social obligations or less important matters, which sometimes suddenly becomes embarrassing. Interest in the subject is necessary. The truth is that if a person can memorize faces, numbers, or facts of any kind, they can memorize anything. The difference is due to the interest in the subject. It is a reality that the things that most arouse our interest for a few moments are registered more strongly in our consciousness, whereas those that do not interest us are not registered in the same way in our memory. It is necessary to conceive interest. Some might argue and declare that they do everything to memorize telephone numbers and that they are interested in them as part of their professional activities. However, there is a vast difference between interest and conception. We can look at a picture, such as a comic strip in a newspaper, with momentary interest in order to enjoy the humor of the joke, but without simultaneously trying to conceive that interest. Therefore, it does not register as would something that was correctly conceived. When looking at a comic strip or a photograph, or observing a simple incident in the street that attracts our interest or attention for an instant, we are aware of the fact that it is not important to us, and thus our interest is purely superficial and momentary. If, on the other hand, it is something we know or believe to be valuable to us, such as, for example, something associated with some experience, a game, or something interesting to which we are intensely devoted, we conceive the matter better than we ordinarily do. Deep conception registers the incident. It is this moment of deep conception that registers the incident or fact in the memory, simultaneously associating it with certain channels of other thoughts, which enables us to recall the registered facts by association of ideas. It is true that the memorization of telephone numbers, addresses, dates of contracts, meeting times, and people's names is an important matter, which every businessman considers to be of more than casual interest and genuinely strives to conceive. Some will argue that certainly the important date of a business meeting holds greater interest for us than a comic strip in the newspaper, and that, therefore, we should dedicate a deeper conception to it than to the comic. This is true. However, the fact remains that, precisely because we know its importance and genuinely wish to memorize it, We interfere with the memorization process because we think about memorizing rather than thinking about conceiving. Reminders destroy faith in memory. Let us suppose that someone calls me and says that he would like me to call him back at 11 o'clock, then giving me a telephone number. And let us suppose that, instead of writing down this number and thereby destroying faith in my memory, I say to myself, now I must memorize that number. I then proceed to repeat it to myself, while unconsciously analyzing it and trying to discover something in this number that will help me memorize it. I continue repeating the number to myself and, at the same time, I argue with myself whether I will remember it and whether I am registering it. I may even try to visualize it. However, this is not the correct way to memorize, for it is possible that an hour later I will not be able to recall any part of the telephone number. One must visualize what is to be memorized. If I repeated the number to myself only once and visualized it, so that I could see the word and the digits with my eyes closed, I would then sit in a state of relaxation and inactivity for a few moments and allow the visualized number to sink deeply into my consciousness. Not by repeating it mentally, which would keep the mind active and prevent the subconscious mind and memory from functioning, but simply by holding it in my mind as an image and letting it register just as a photograph is registered on a film through exposure time. However, at the same time that I was visualizing the number, I would be visualizing the person and the time of 11 o'clock. One must briefly hold the mental image. If I wanted only the number and had no special time to dial it, I would visualize the person and the number, keeping this image in mind for a few moments. Feeling afterwards as if I had absorbed and assimilated it mentally, I would dismiss the whole matter from my consciousness as something that was finished, registered, and permanently and indelibly fixed in my memory. From that moment on, whenever I thought of that person or heard of them, I would immediately think of that telephone number, for both would be associated in my memory. Or if I heard the telephone number or saw it written, I would remember the person to whom it belonged, for the thought of the former would provoke the thought of the latter, not as numbers and facts, but as images in my mind, so that I would see again the same image I had created in the process of registration. First principle. Nowadays there are many memorization systems in the form of privately or personally discovered keys that are so complex that, in any attempt to memorize facts and numbers, faces or places according to the system, more effort is required to concentrate on the system itself than on the points to be remembered. And when it comes to recalling the memorized facts, the system of associating ideas with the desired facts is so complicated that it becomes baffling and ineffective. One must be conscious of one fact at a time. We cannot stray from the principle that, when trying to memorize a fact, the mind must be able to unburden itself of all other facts, except for the one to be memorized. The reiteration of the principle that the mind cannot be conscious of two facts at the same time, and conceive them simultaneously, should make it evident that attempting to memorize a fact while at the same time trying to recall and apply a complicated memorization system would simply interfere with the laws that make memorization possible. Eliminate extraneous facts. If the fact to be memorized can be visualized in an image as free as possible from extraneous facts and secondary points, it will be more easily transferred from the external, objective consciousness to the subconsciousness, where memory is located. The opposite is like trying to paint someone's portrait so that it attracts immediate attention and causes people to focus their interest on the physiognomy and characteristic features of the painted figure, by placing in the background scenes and incidents from that person's life, such as scenes from their childhood, views of them sitting at their desk, a picture of their house, of their wife and children, of the sports they are interested in, of a book they wrote, of the great trademark representing the business they run, etc. One could argue that by associating all these things with the individual in the portrait, a composite of many elements could be created, so that, with these things associated with one another, thinking of one thing would make one think of the others. However, everyone knows that upon observing such a painting, attention would not be focused on the portrait, but rather on all the elements in the picture, such that this divided attention would deprive anyone of the important aspects of the concentrated conception necessary for perfect registration in memory. Simplify the mental image. It is a simple matter to associate a telephone number with an individual, not by thinking of both elements with equal importance, but by concentrating attention on the telephone number and visualizing it with greater regard, and with only a vague conception of the individual to whom it belongs. But when one attempts to go beyond this, trying to add the individual's address, their business contacts, and other such incidents, the image becomes too complicated for perfect memorization, as well as excessively divided among its elements capable of attracting attention, to be entirely conceived and registered as a unit. Second principle. Classify the subject to be memorized. In the attempt to register any fact in the mind, it must be cleared of all other important things, except for one main association. Every fact that the reader wishes to register undoubtedly fits into some classification or category that represents its main connection or association. This is like the classification of facts in the reference books of a large library. If I were to go to a large library, representing the great repository of knowledge, and wish to know whether the composition of water is H2O or HO2, my very natural impulse would be to understand that this fact would be associated with the general classification of chemistry. If I wanted to know the exact route taken by Columbus in his discovery of America, or of the American coast, I would refer to a book dealing with travels. If I wished to know something about the life of Marie Antoinette, I would look under the classification of books known as biographies. Certainly, in any of these cases, I would choose the most direct method of associating the desired fact with other facts directly related to it. For example, when looking for details of Marie Antoinette's life, I would not complicate my search by looking for books dealing with the lives of other queens with whom she might have been in contact, or of great generals, of the history of wars, of the construction of beautiful palaces in France, of the question of clothing, or of the history of the first use of mirrors, even though each of these subjects might eventually provide me with some small facts related to Marie Antoinette. Memory is a mental library. Memory is a great storehouse of knowledge. For all practical purposes, it is easily comparable to a large library, for all facts stored in memory are naturally classified. All telephone numbers are associated first and foremost with telephones, and then divided into associations with individuals, firms, organizations, or places. All people's faces are associated under the classifications of relatives, friends, associates, information departments, commercial centers, etc. All historical facts are associated with notable historical events in general, as well as with individuals or places. One must associate the fact with a single classification. No more than one element of association or classification is necessary to store a fact correctly, so that when trying to recall the fact, the tendency will be to associate it with the classification element under which it was stored and recorded in the memory. For this reason, the simpler the classification, and the simpler the element of association when making the record, the easier it will be to extract the recorded fact, or to find it in the great storehouse of memory. Third principle. Forcing the mind interferes with memorization. Naturally, all this requires concentration. However, if the simple exercises given in the second part are practiced systematically, and if, during concentration experiments, the mind and body are relaxed and no intense effort is used to force the mind at any point, the ability to concentrate will be easily developed. Remember that any mental effort aimed at trying to induce the mind to do something entails engaging the mind, and engaging the mind in a complex manner impedes concentration and relaxation. Perfect concentration is only possible in a state of relaxation. There must be a minimum of effort rather than a maximum effort. In every great psychological experiment, the beginner, the neophyte, attempts to force and voluntarily activate their mental activities, as if trying to force a large body of water to narrow into a thin stream so that it could be focused on a single point. This activation, this voluntary effort, impedes relaxation. Relaxation is useful for mental assimilation. Concentration should be a passive work rather than an active one, and this requires the relaxation of the body and of all mental activities, except for the faculty of visualization and conception. Thus, the person who is in a state of concentration becomes momentarily oblivious to their objective consciousness and to their surroundings. They must not be easily distracted, not even by another person passing through the room, nor if they are softly called by name, or even by the ringing of a telephone. When the ability to concentrate becomes perfectly developed, a marching band could pass by the window, playing loudly, without the person in a state of concentration ever knowing or realizing that it is playing. Their ears may hear and their eyes may see, but if their thoughts are directed toward one point or subject, everything else will naturally be excluded, and, unless the mind wavers or shifts its attention, thereby breaking the concentration, consciousness will not be able to perceive two things at the same time. A great good and a great power for achieving important things in life, as well as a wonderful benefit for the health, mind, and body, will result from the ability to relax from time to time and concentrate the conscious perception of our being on a subject, allowing it to sink deeply into the subconscious to be permanently recorded. In this way, thoughts of health, peace, and happiness, as well as important business matters, can be transformed into part of our inner consciousness, where they take root and become active subconsciously and for the good of the being. Success in memory improvement depends on the development of concentration, a subject addressed in the previous chapter, which was dedicated to presenting practical rules and exercises for this purpose. End of the book Rosicrucian Art of Absent Healing. Do you want access to this and all the complete audiobooks on the channel, plus the ebook version? Click the link in the description or scan the QR code in the left corner of the screen to access our library, where you can listen to your favorite esoteric books without ad interruptions, lock your screen, or use other apps while the narration plays, and even download the ebook version to follow along as you listen. Listen on your computer via web browser, or download the app from the Play Store. After subscribing, you will receive an email with your login details, password, and step-by-step instructions on how to access the books through the Hotmart app.